All right, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about the biggest economic uh, fallacy or lie or misunderstanding that exists. And it was first coined, at least that I'm aware, by Bastiat in July 9th or 1850s. We're talking a long time ago. He wrote several famous economic books. But again, it's the seen versus the unseen, right? And there's an endless list of examples of this. But again, the basic idea goes like this: in that the government or people vote for something under the guise of it's going to help this group or that group. And the thing is that a lot of times it does help that group, right? The problem is that they don't look at the unforeseen or the unintended consequences, right? And again, if you take, there's a lot of examples that you can't really talk about on YouTube. What went on over the last couple of years is probably the most obvious one. But if you take, let's say, increased taxes, right? This is one that not a lot of people talk about. Well, what happens when you increase taxes? Well, yes, the government gets more money, and the government can use that to spend, and jobs will be provided. But and again, people say, "Oh, that's so good. The government's creating jobs." But the unseen is okay. What would have happened with that money if the government didn't tax it? And again, nobody knows for sure, but the one thing we do know for sure is that money would have been spent in some way. And because that money would have been spent in some way, people would have, jobs would have been created. So this is the problem. And that's just one of the endless examples, right? I mean, subsidies, right? Subsidies is another big one too, and that it's like, oh, well, we have to subsidize industry X because if industry X doesn't get subsidized, all these people will lose their jobs and unemployment will go up and poor people will be created and hell, maybe people might even die. That's okay. You have good intentions there, but what is the problem? The problem is that okay, what you're doing is you're taking from you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? And that if that money wasn't taken, that money would have been spent in another way and jobs would have been created. Yeah, you would have lost jobs in industry X, but you would have created jobs in industry Y, right? And again, like a real world example, right? I mean, look at the horse and buggy industry, right? In that, what happens if the government would have massively subsidized the horse and buggy industry to save jobs, right? Because at the time it would have made sense, but looking back on it, it would have been a terrible idea, right? Terrible idea. I mean, what if the government would have subsidized massively subsidized the physical book industry, right? Now knowing that again, e-reading and just reading online or whatever is a lot more efficient. It's cheaper, and you don't need as much paper. Like it's better in most ways. I mean, some people like reading physical books still. But again, like the list goes on and on of these examples, right? I mean, tariffs are the same thing. Whatever, right? So again, this is the biggest economic fallacy in existence, right? And the problem is that probably 80 or 90% of the population believes it, right? Or they pick and choose where they believe it to an extent, but as an aggregate, they believe it, right? And of all the things, this is probably the thing that is hurting society the most because if we simply stopped practicing this fallacy, our standard of living would necessarily skyrocket, right? Because we would stop propping up things that are not producing anything or should go out of business, right? I mean, again, like bailouts too. I mean, this is another big one too. You see, but again, like a lot of people complain about bailout of industry, an industry they don't like, but if it's an industry they do like, then all of a sudden they're for it, right? And that is the problem, right? That is the problem with all of this kind of stuff is that it's the simple way of putting it is that the market needs to be able to operate, right? The free market, right? The way that our standard of living increases is the free market being allowed to operate because the free market allocates resources to those who can use them the most efficiently. And when resources are allocated to those who can use them the most efficiently, that's when our standard of living goes up. right? Now, again, people, the common argument against that is, oh, well, you're going to get all these poor people and they're going to suffer. But it's like, are poor people better off now or are they better off 100 years ago? Right? Are poor people better off in the States or Canada or Africa? Right? So again, this idea that the more free market you get, the more poor people are created, it's like, no, like not only is there no correlation with it, like it makes so little sense. I don't even know where to begin, right? The more free the market, the less poor you have, right? And again, even if you take someone who's poor in Canada or the States, they're still richer than probably like 95% of people in your average African country, right? So it's kind of a really bad comparison. Um, so again, like how you fix these issues, it's really not all that complicated. You simply allow the market to operate, right? And this is the other thing too. Against, oh well, you think that if we have this free market, well then the rich will accumulate all the wealth. But it's like, again, like if you look at these poorer countries, if you look at socialist countries, right? If you look at socialist countries, and there still are people, there still is massive wealth inequities, right? And again, the other fallacy is that wealth is just arbitrarily distributed, right? Like, oh, we need wealth redistribution. Well, again, the premise there is that it was arbitrarily distributed, but it wasn't. It was distributed because the most competent people will accumulate the most, right? I mean, if you look at Amazon, I mean, Jeff Bezos started Amazon out of his garage, right? I mean, he operated it at a loss for like 15 years, I think it was. Their stock value went down like 95% in the dot-com bubble. Like, what percentage of business people could do that? Like, not even 1%, I'd say. And that's people that are running businesses, right? So this idea that wealth is just arbitrarily distributed, it's such an obvious lie and just stupidity. It's not even funny. Again, not that some shenanigans doesn't go on, but again, the way that our standard of living goes up is, again, resources need to accumulate in the hands of those that can use it the most. And again, like think of it as farming goes too. Like, do you want the best farmer or the worst farmer to have the most land? Right? It's like, obviously it's the best farmer because let's just say we say, okay, the worst farmer gets the same amount of land as the best farmer. Well, guess what? Less food is going to be produced, and because less food is produced, it's going to be more expensive, right? So again, like this is just like basic stuff, and it boggles my mind that, again, it's because of all the brainwashing that goes on in society, but it boggles my mind that there's so many people that don't understand this stuff, right? So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.